Raise a glass to freedom, something they can never take away, no matter what they tell you. If you were a fan of or if you are a fan of the Hamilton musical, those words might sound familiar to you. They come straight out of the song, The Story of Tonight, which during the height of the Hamilton craze, I thought was very fitting words for a Seder, raising a glass to freedom. That's what we do 4 times over the course of a Seder, right? And during the height of the Hamilton craze, there was also another hot musical at the time on Broadway. It was called Dear Evan Hansen, and there was a song in that musical called You Will Be Found. And for some reason, the Hamilton team and the Dear Evan Hansen team got together, and they did a mashup, a medley of these 2 songs, The Story of Tonight and You Will Be Found, and they called it Found/Tonight. And I've been listening to it in these days leading up to Pesach because there's something that has really resonated with me from that song in connection to not only the Seders, but the theme of one of the major themes of Pesach that I've been sitting with this year. The song, the mashup, Found Tonight, ends with the following words. And when our children tell our story, you will be found. They'll tell the story of tonight. No matter what they tell you, tomorrow there'll be more of us telling the story of tonight. The story of tonight. Of course, the theme from the story of tonight, that our children are telling our story and we're passing the story of the Exodus down from generation to generation, and there's a big emphasis in the Haggadah that we must pass this down from generation to generation, and also raising a glass to freedom. I mean, that song was built for a Seder, right? But this you will be found notion from Dear Evan Hansen has been sitting with me really strongly because I've been reflecting on the following. The story and rituals of Passover remind us of these moments, that even when our Jewish identity is hidden by circumstances beyond our control, it is not lost, it is waiting to be found. And I think a really big example of this comes, of course, from the story of Exodus, from the story of Moses himself, who, when he was born into a world where it was not a safe place to be a Hebrew or an Israelite, which is what the Jewish people were called at the time, as they were, of course, slaves in Egypt. And Pharaoh, at the time Moses was born, had put out the decree that all all Hebrew baby boys should be killed. And so, of course, Moses' mom, Yocheved, places him in a basket in the Nile River, and he drifts along the river until Bat Paro, the daughter of Pharaoh, pulls him out of the Nile. And the daughter of Pharaoh, she knows what her father, Pharaoh, has decreed. And she knows what's going on with Hebrew baby boys. And in the Torah text itself, she says, Mi yaldei ha'ivrim zeh, this is a Hebrew child. She knows. And she pulls him out, and she takes him for her own. And Miriam, Moses' sister, who is watching from the bushes, she runs up to the daughter of Pharaoh and says, I can get you a wet nurse from among the Hebrew slaves to nurse him until he can be weaned. And miraculously, the daughter of Pharaoh, who knows this is a Hebrew child, who knows who might be available to be a wet nurse at this time is probably his birth mother, Yocheved, she agrees to this. So Miriam takes Moses back to his family home, his Hebrew family home. And so from that moment, I wonder if in those years that his mother was nursing him, did he know, was he exposed to the fact that he himself was a Hebrew, which, he was young, so who knows how much he would remember from that. But we also know today that the first 5 years are very formative years in a person's life, so maybe there were things he was exposed to when he was being nursed that stuck with him when he was older. It doesn't say in the Torah, it's not clear. And then he goes back when he's grown. It says when he's sometime later when he's grown, he goes back and the daughter of Pharaoh adopts him as her own child, and he grows up in Pharaoh's palace as Prince of Egypt. And she knows that he is a Hebrew. Does she reveal it to him, or does she keep it hidden? It's much safer to keep that hidden growing up in Pharaoh's palace. But again, the Torah doesn't tell us, so we don't know. Does Moses know his true Jewish identity, his true Hebrew identity? Now, recently, this past week, I was listening to a podcast I really like that comes out of Shalom Hartman. It's called Identity/Crisis, an apt name when I'm talking about Jewish identity today. And it's with Yehuda Kurtzer. And he had a guest on this past week, Rabbi Bert Vysotsky. And Rabbi Bert Vysotsky was a rabbinic expert, rabbinic advisor on the movie, The Prince of Egypt. And this podcast, this episode of the podcast is called A Hollywood Midrash, The Making of the Prince of Egypt. And so Yehuda Kurtzer and Rabbi Bert Vysotsky talk about how in the movie Midrash of the Prince of Egypt, the moment that Moses in the movie realizes his Jewish or Hebrew identity is when he sees the Egyptian taskmaster beating the Hebrew slave. And there are these echoes in that moment of something he heard from Miriam but didn't realize that was his sister, and these echoes of, oh my goodness, I am a Hebrew. And Yehuda Kurtzer says that in that moment, for Moses, there is a reclamation of his Hebrew identity. And then he adds, in good Hollywood form, it becomes this moment of self-discovery, and it's this really dramatic moment. And so whether that's the moment that Moses truly understood and he identified more with the Hebrew slave than he did with the Egyptian taskmaster, certainly. But in the Torah text itself, we know for certain that by the time of the burning bush, Moses does find out that he is a Hebrew, that he is Jewish. Because God says to Moses from the burning bush, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. God is identifying as the God of the Hebrew people, the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. And Moses, I'm the God of your father. That means I'm your God too. That means you're a Hebrew. And though in the interaction between God and Moses of the burning bush, Moses was resistant to the call to leadership, once he truly understood and his Jewish identity was fully found and fully revealed, then could he be the leader that we needed him to be. I also have been reflecting on this hidden and found nature of our identities through the rituals of Pesach, because we have Bedikat Chametz and we have the Afikomen. So Bedikat Chametz, the night before Pesach, we've cleaned our homes, we've rid our homes of Chametz, but then some take 10, some take other numbers, we take certain amounts of Chametz, hide them around our homes, and then we find them. It's such an interesting ritual that we do. And then the Afikomen, at the end of the Seder, in order to finish the Seder, we must find this hidden Afikomen that at some point was hidden earlier in the Seder. So even though Chametz and Matzah, Afikomen, have come to represent different things in our tradition, they both share this ritual of someone hiding them and then someone finding them. In order for us to proceed with Pesach, with Bedikat Chametz, and in order for us to finish the Seder with the Afikomen, they need to be found. So why do we do these rituals of hiding and finding? In the Rabbinical Assembly Haggadah, the Passover Haggadah, the Feast of Freedom, when talking about Bedikat Chametz, it says, if we scrutinize our premises so punctiliously, how much more scrupulously should we examine the crevices and crannies of our hearts? So of course this is a symbolic, metaphorical ritual that is meant for us to examine the parts inside of us that we keep hidden and the parts that we want to find in ourselves and reveal to the world. And so I think when we do Bedikat Chametz and when we do the search for the Afikomen, it's maybe a reminder that if or when we find ourselves hiding some or all of our Jewish identity, we can remember that what is hidden still matters. Even if there are circumstances that we can't control and we have to hide parts of who we are as Jews, that identity still matters. And sometimes it's okay to reveal who we are. And sometimes our tradition asks us, we should be revealing who we are. And I had an experience where I was asking myself this question of, should I reveal that I'm Jewish or not recently? This summer, I won a trip to the Bahamas at a Dodgers game, which is a great story for another time. And I brought a friend with me. And on the plane ride there, I think my job is pretty interesting as a rabbi. And also, when I tell people I'm a rabbi, not only do I think it's an interesting job, but it also identifies me as a Jew. And the friend that I went with is a casting director, which I also think is an interesting job. And on the plane, my friend suggested maybe we don't tell people what our jobs are. Maybe we come up with something a little less interesting. And so I said, okay, sure. So we get in a taxi we get to the Bahamas, we get in a taxi, and immediately the taxi driver asks us, so what do you guys do for work? And I had that moment. I had that hesitation. I thought, let me come up with a different job that doesn't reveal that I'm Jewish and that doesn't reveal that I'm a rabbi. Let me say I'm something else. And I took that moment and I said to myself, you know what? I'm not going to hide who I am. And I said, I'm a rabbi. And of course, the taxi driver then said, oh, so you're Jewish? And I said, yes, I am. I'm Jewish. And then the taxi driver said, you know, a lot of Jews come to the Bahamas over Passover. Why don't they tip so well? So, of course, at the end of the taxi ride, I gave him a really big tip, because I wanted to prove to him we do tip well, and I'm a Jew and I'm a rabbi and I tip well. And I told my friend as we got out of the taxi what I had done, and my friend said to me, you're such a sucker, you fell for his line, which I did. But I remember that story more so than the fact that I'm a sucker, about how I decided in that moment I could have hid who I am, and I didn't want to. I had a backup plan. I could have told him I was anything else. But I wanted to say, I'm a rabbi because I'm proud of that. And I'm a Jew because I'm proud of that. But it can be scary because we live in a time when being openly Jewish can feel complicated. And there are moments when it does feel easier to stay a little hidden. And yet, our tradition, especially on Passover with our story and our rituals, reminds us that our Jewish identity, even when it has to be hidden, in the moments that it does have to, that identity will never be lost. It's always waiting to be found. So this Passover, let's ask ourselves, are there parts of my Jewish identity that I have been keeping hidden? And am I ready, even in a small way, to let it be seen? So, as we've done many times over the past 2 nights, once again tonight, we have the opportunity to gather around our Shabbat tables, and we can all raise a glass to freedom, to be exactly who we are. We are not meant to stay hidden. We are meant to be found. Chag Sameach.